Good afternoon everybody and welcome to the stream. I'm Robert from the El Magnifico Games channel, and today we are going to continue with our usual Wednesday poetry and riddles. So we'll begin with the poem that we left off on last week, which was Philomel by Richard Barnfield. Now Richard Barnfield was this gentleman, an English poet, unsurprisingly, and he had an obscure though close relationship with William Shakespeare, which has made him an interesting subject for scholars. So, let's get into it. As it fell upon a day in the merry month of May, sitting in a pleasant shade which a grove of myrtles made, beasts did leap and birds did sing, trees did grow and plants did spring, everything did banish moan, save the nightingale alone. She, poor bird, as all forlorn, leaned her breast up till a fawn, and there sung the doleful's ditty, that to hear it was a great pity. Fee, 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 now would she cry, Teroo, teroo, by and by, that to hear her so complain, scarce I could from tears refrain, for her grief so lively shown, made me think upon my own. Ah, thought I, thou mournt'st in vain, none takes pity on thy pain. Senseless trees, I cannot hear thee, ruthless beasts, they will not cheer thee. King Pandion, he is dead, all thy friends are lapped in lead. All thy fellow birds do sing, careless of thy sorrowing. Even so, poor bird, like thee, none alive will pity me. Goodness me. I'm not sure I noticed the first time I read this how self-pitying this particular poem is. Still, it's very well written. So, let's head on to some poetry that we haven't seen before. So, the next poem is by Thomas Dekker. Thomas Dekker was an English Elizabethan dramatist and pamphleteer, a versatile and prolific writer whose career spanned several decades and brought him into contact with many of the period's most famous dramatists. How many of his... Yeah, we don't have much of his poetry here, so there's probably not much point in reading through the whole article. So, let's carry on, shall we? So, this poem is entitled Sweet Content. One could say that's almost what I'm trying to produce. Anywho. Art thou poor, yet hast thou golden slumbers? O sweet content, art thou rich, yet is thy mind perplexed? O punishment, dost thou laugh to see how fools are vexed, to add to golden numbers golden numbers? O sweet content, O sweet content. Work apace, 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 apace. Honest labour bears a lovely face, then hey nonny nonny, hey nonny nonny. Canst drink the waters of the crisped spring? O sweet content, swimmest thou in wealth, yet sinkest in thine own tears, O punishment. Then he that patiently once burden bears, no burden bears, but is a king, a king. O sweet content, O sweet content. Work apace, 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 apace. Honest labour bears a lovely face, then hey nonny nonny, hey nonny nonny. So what's going on here? I can certainly see very obviously, the repetition that's going on. Which is a well-used poetic technique. I can also see that it doesn't have a simple meter. Clearly the meter is changing throughout. I wonder what they mean by sweet content. Do they mean contentedness? Probably. Because if we look at the first 4 verses, art thou poor, yet hast golden slumbers, O sweet content. Art thou rich, yet thy mind perplexed, O O punishment. So clearly there's a contrast being drawn between content and punishment, and although they're not exactly antonyms, it does seem extremely likely to me that that's how they mean it. That's how the poet Thomas Dekker meant it. Contentedness, that's my best guess anyway. Interesting. Canst drink the waters of the crisped spring, O sweet content. I don't know what the crisped spring is, unless it just means a watery spring that has very crisp water, as in refreshing. Canst. See, I'd have thought canst is negative, is it not? Let me check. Second person singular simple form of can is not. Is not negative. Second person. Okay, so it's a form of can that would be used when you're referring to another person. So not can you, but canst you. Okay, so canst drink the waters of the crisped spring. So it's asking, can you? Then he that patiently wants burden bears. No burden bears, but is a king a king. Why would someone want burden to bear down on them? I'm not sure I fully follow that. Yes, I think overall this poem isn't completely clicking with me, and I'm not sure whether that's intentional or not. There's certain aspects of it that remind me of nonsense poetry, like hey nonny nonny, although we've come across that expression quite a few times, haven't we? And it's almost like it did have a very specific meaning once upon a time, but has been lost. I seem to remember the closest we could get to finding a definition for hey nonny nonny in the past, when we've looked it up, is that it was a general exclamation of simultaneously jovial happiness, but also silliness. I suppose the sort of thing you might expect, almost as if it's acting as a stand-in for the way you might expect people to behave on holy days and high days. So, people at play. That would certainly figure with the previous verse here, honest labour bears a lovely face, because that would again be creating a contrast between labour and play, if that's correct. So yeah, the one thing that I really is clicking with me about this poem is the fact that it seems to be about contrasts. I'm not sure if it's trying to come across as as insightful by trying to point out trying to draw out counterintuitive elements of everyday life. That is to say, things that are the opposite of what you'd expect, or if in fact it is just trying to be a nonsense poem and isn't taking itself very seriously. Hard to say. But I think that's all I can really say about this poem. I suppose I could look at the rhyming structure, couldn't I? Content and punishment rhyme. Vexed and perplexed. Apace face. And do we see the same again? Oh, we have spring and king here. Slumbers and numbers. That's a surprisingly complex rhyming scheme, isn't it? So A, B, C, B, C, A. A, B, C, B, C, A. I don't think we've seen that one before. And then how does it progress from there? Then we go back to B. Then we go to D, D. And then the final line just stands alone. So it's A, B, C, B, C, A, B, D, D, E. It's an interesting one. Again, it doesn't figure with any form that I recognise of poetry, but it seems to be yet another example of a poet just inventing a form for themselves, and by repeating it, they establish it in the minds of the reader. I won't bother syllable counting, because I'm fairly confident that the meters will, or rather the poetic feet will add up, so that the top stanza and the bottom stanza are, at least roughly speaking, equivalent in terms of their rhythm. I mean, you can more or less see that, especially with the amount of repetition that's going on. Interesting one. Do feel like I'm missing something. Right, so next we move on to Thomas Haywood. So who was Thomas Haywood? Be a better idea if I looked him up in Wikipedia, wouldn't it? Thomas Haywood was an English playwright, actor and author. His main contributions were to late Elizabethan and early Jacobean theatre. He is best known for his masterpiece A Woman Killed with Kindness, a domestic tragedy, which was first performed in 1603 at the Rose Theatre by the Worcester's Men Company. Interesting, Worcester's Men Company, not Men's Company. He was a prolific writer, claiming to have had an entire hand, or at least a main finger, in 220 plays, though only a fraction of his work has survived. That is quite a lot of plays. Let's see, if that was in a year, which obviously it wasn't, but just to give us a rough idea, that would be roughly 2 plays every 3 days. Or 1.5 plays a day. Sorry, other way around. 1.5 days of play. So if that was over the course of 10 years, then that becomes 15 days. How long was he active? Let's say he was active from roughly 1595, just for the sake of argument. So that's about 45 years. So we'll say roughly 45 years. Okay, so it's 4.5 times 15, which is going to be 60 plus 7. No, 7.5. So 67.5, so that's 1 play approximately every 67.5 day. That's not actually that many. Because it doesn't say he wrote them. It says he had a hand, or at least a main finger. Oh, sorry, 220 plays. I worked it out as if it was 240, so that's even less. Yeah, so I won't bother to do a back of the envelope style calculation again, but it's probably less than 1 play every 70 days that he had a main finger in, as he puts it. So I suppose it depends how much work he thinks involved in having a main finger in a play, but that's not as ridiculous as you might think. I just want to check, how much of his work do we have? Just 2 poems, it looks like. Okay, I won't bother then to go through his entire article. For poets that we have more material, it is nice to read through a great deal more of their biography, because often events in their life may end up being reflected in the poetry they've written, but we get through so many poets, it's not worth it if the particular selection in the anthology only has 1 or 2 poems, in my opinion. If anyone feels strongly otherwise and would like me to read through the articles more, just let me know. Right, so the first one is Matin's Song. Now Matin, if I recall correctly, is that not a type of prayer you make in the morning? Obsolete form of morning, yes, because that comes from Latin. Morning prayers, together with Lauds, the earliest of the canonical hours, traditionally prayed at sunrise or earlier, yes. So Matin Song, so presumably, obviously this is a piece of poetry, it's not actually a song, but it could be a ballad, couldn't it? But much more likely to be a poem which is praising the hymns that are sung during the Matin period, I would assume, early in the morning. So, pack clouds away, and welcome day. With night we banish sorrow. Sweet air, blow soft, mount lark aloft, to give my love good morrow. Wings from the wind to please her mind, notes from the lark I'll borrow. Bird, prune thy wing, nightingale, sing, to give my love good morrow. To give my love good morrow, notes from them all I'll borrow. Wake from thy nest, robin red breast, sing, birds in every furrow, and from each bill let music shrill, give my fair love good morrow. Blackbird and thrush in every bush, stare, linnet and cock-sparrow. You pretty elves, among yourselves, sing my fair love good morrow. To give my love good morrow, sing birds in every furrow. Okay, so I see what they've done there. They've substituted the morning prayer, and in particular the songs of morning prayer, with that of the birds, which makes sense because birds sing during, well, certain species of bird tend to sing at sunrise early in the morning. In fact, if you listen now, the environmental sounds I put together to play in the background of these streams with the birds, those are actually British birds singing in the morning. That's where I got them from. It was public domain, of course. So the poet has substituted the actual prayers and presumably songs that are that take place within a traditional Christian setting, and substituted them for the birds singing, and then they've used that to then transform the poem into a more traditional to be a poem of a more traditional subject matter, that of nature and of love. It's a love poem. I mean, we've read a lot of love poetry up to this point. It's a very, very common subject. So that in itself isn't particularly inventive, but the idea of the whole conceit of Matin, I would say, is, so far as I'm aware, relatively novel. Of course, I'm not well versed in all poetry ever written up to this point, but I don't remember coming across this as a theme before. So what else can we say about it? Having a quick look at the meter. Sweet air, blow soft, Mount Lark, aloft, that's 8 syllables, so presumably 4 feet. To give my love good morrow. That's 7. To give my love good morrow. See, with night we banish sorrow was also 7, which really throws me off. Sweet air, blow soft, Mount Lark, aloft. Aloft? Aloft. I think you would... Aloft? Sorry, I'm trying to think where the stress would naturally fall on that word. Aloft. Aloft. You would want to put it on the end, wouldn't you? Sweet air, blow soft, Mount Lark, aloft. Yes, this definitely has an upward tendency to it, doesn't it? That I say upwards as if that's at all clear. You tend to want to hit the ends of the words, well, each pair of syllables hard, so that makes it iambic. So, to give my love good morrow. See, this is the weird one. This one also seems like it's probably iambic. That is the fourth verse, because it's got 7 syllables and it seems to end on a weak syllable. But that's like docking an iamb, which you wouldn't normally do, because then you've made it feminine. Although you might add a syllable to an iamb to give it a feminine ending. Ah, so maybe this is a ballad. Maybe it's 4 feet, 3 feet, and they've just added an extra syllable to the end to make it feminine. That would make sense. Day and aloft don't rhyme, but sorrow and morrow do. So we've got some rhyme going on. Borrow, morrow, borrow. I mean, those are the same words repeating themselves, aren't they? Although they do, in a sense, rhyme. What else do we have? Wings from the wind to please her mind. That's 4 feet. Notes from the lark I'll borrow. Again, this is still, up to this point, consistent with this being a ballad. Bird. I really feel the need to hit that hard, because it's the first word of a line and also after a caesura, and it's a noun. And a form of address in this case. So everything is telling me to hit this hard. But that would mean we're in for a trochee, but that's not what we see after this. Bird, prune thy wing. That's strong and strong, which shouldn't happen. So from what I've heard, anyway. Nightingale, sing. Nightingale, sing. Again, we've got the same sort of strangeness going on here. With nightingale, I don't think there's any doubt that it should be strong on the first syllable, weak on the second, and then strong on the third. You wouldn't do the inverse, you would say nightingale. That just sounds ridiculous. It's nightingale. But then sing, being a verb and a command, and after a caesura, all these things... No, I don't think any one of those on its own would necessarily override the meter of the poetry, but the fact that all these things are all pointing to the same thing, that this next syllable should be hit hard, or this next word should be emphasised, and it's a one-syllable word, so you hit it hard. It really plays havoc with the scansion. So we've got a sort of strong, strong, weak, strong, strong, weak, strong, strong. It's possible that I'm missing something here, and in fact it's quite likely I'm missing something here, and there is an actual explanation, but to me that scansion just doesn't work. It doesn't follow the structure that, as I understand it, poetry in the English language is supposed to. To give my love good morrow. That is, when I say poetry in the English language, I mean, poetry with meter. I'm not obviously excluding free verse. Where was I? To give my love good morrow. Again, that's effectively 3 feet. Notes from them all I'll borrow. And again. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's ballady, but it's not quite a ballad. Right, which line is the equivalent of this one? It's going to be this. You pretty elves. You pretty elves. Yeah, it's funny. Elves, I think, is normally a word you would tend to want to hit harder. Because it's, in terms of its function in the sentence, it's, it's the... Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's actually the subject of the clause, because everything that comes before is acting as an adjective. But it's certainly acting as a form of address. So it's a content word rather than a function word. So it's one that is important to the sentence, one you're likely to want to stress, but I feel as though the line feels more trochaic, and so the metre of the poetry makes you want to demote it. You pretty elves, among yourselves. And then it reverses. Now we've got I ams. Okay, so what if I tried to pronounce it the other way round? You pretty elves. That just sounds wrong, because with pretty, you'd stress the final syllable, would you not? Not the first syllable. It's not pretty, it's pretty. No, I'm wrong, aren't I? You pretty elves. Okay, yep. I made a mistake there. That makes sense. So it's, you pretty elves among yourselves. So that's iambic. Right, let's go back up here. If we tried to do this iambically, it'd be bird prune thy wing, nightingale sing. Doesn't work. So in the second stanza, we can... I think the mistake was my own, and it does actually work as a iambic tetrameter, but in the same cannot be said of the equivalent verse in the previous stanza. I can't rule out the possibility there's something going on that I don't understand, but it seems to just not work to me. Anyway, I think we've analysed that one to death. There's not a lot else to say, is there? We've looked at the rhythm and the rhyme. We've looked at the meaning. I mean, aside from saying that it's a love poem, so it's actually no, we could say slightly more than we have already. It, strictly speaking, doesn't actually complement the object of the poem, which is the love interest. It just states that they are their love interest, and the main body of the poem is just directing various animals with beautiful voices to do a favour for the speaker, which is to sing for their love interest, the object of the poem. Which, again, I suppose is slightly novel. But yeah, I can't think of anything else to say about that one, so we'll move on unless anyone has any comments. So the next poem is entitled The Message. Ye little birds that sit and sing amidst the shady valleys, and see how Phyllis sweetly walks within her garden alleys. Go, pretty birds, about her bower, sing, pretty birds, she may not lower. Ah me, methinks I see her frown, ye pretty wantons warble. Go tell her through your chirping bills, as you by me are bidden. To her is only known my love, which from the world is hidden. Go, pretty birds, and tell her so, see that your notes strain not too low, for still methinks I see her frown, ye pretty wantons warble. Go tune your voices' harmony, and sing, I am her lover, strain loud and sweet that every note with sweet content may move her. And she that hath the sweetest voice, tell her I will not change my choice, yet still methinks I see her frown, ye pretty wantons warble. O fly, make haste, see, she falls into a pretty slumber, sing round about her rosy bed, that waking she may wonder, say to her 'tis her lover true, that sendeth love to you, and when you hear her kind reply, return with pleasant warblings. So this is in a very similar theme. Sweet in its way. I wonder if Phyllis the name is significant. Female given name from ancient Greek. That makes me think it's much more likely that it has some significance. Foliage. Greek mythology, a girl who killed herself for love and was turned into an almond tree. Believe it or not, that is not particularly unusual for Greek mythology. There's a lot of transformations of that sort. So it's possible that could be the illusion that's being made. Not necessarily that this is the same Phyllis, but it would fit the theme of love. Otherwise, river god. The god of homonymous river in Bithynia. Of the homonymous river in Bithynia. I don't remember reading the word homonymous before, but looking at it, it seems very much like it would mean a word which sounds like the thing that it is named for, having the same name as another, like a namesake. Of a pertaining to a homonym, and that would be a word that sounds the same. So yes. Oh, both sounds and is spelled the same as another word. Okay. The title character of the tale of Phyllis and Aristotle in medieval legend. I'm not familiar with that. Phyllis, mother of the Trojan Archaeus. Alcaeus, possibly. Phyllis, consort of Eruthalion. A female given name from ancient Greek derived from the mythological character. Okay, let's have a quick look on... Nope. On Wikipedia then. So, the tale of Phyllis and Aristotle is a medieval cautionary tale about the triumph of a seductive woman, Phyllis, over the greatest male intellect. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. It is one of several power of women stories from that time. Among early versions is the French L'Ide d'Aristotle from 1220. The story of the dominatrix and the famous intellectual was taken up by artists from the 12th century onwards, in media from stone sculpture in churches to panels of wood or ivory, textiles such as carpets and tapestries, engravings, oil paintings, brass jugs, aquamanile, and stained glass. Artists attracted to the theme include Hans Baldung, Albrecht Dürer, Lucas Cranach the Elder, and Alessandro Turchi. The tale varies in the telling, but the core of it is as follows. Aristotle advises his pupil Alexander to avoid Phyllis, the seductive mistress of his king. The seductive mistress of his father, the king, but is himself captivated by her. She agrees to ride him on condition that she plays the role of dominatrix. Phyllis has secretly told Alexander what to expect, and he witnesses Phyllis proving that a woman's charms can overcome even the greatest philosopher's male intellect. Phyllis is also described as Alexander's mistress or possibly wife, rather than his father's. Okay. There's not much evidence there, actually, of wrongdoing. I mean, it sounds like she may have entered into the arrangement without the without the right motivations. So perhaps that's what the warning is about. In times where chastity was valued, that this was clearly a loose woman. But not much evidence there of anything actually really bad happening. So I doubt that's what this is referring to anyway, the poem. Let's look at the other Phyllis. Phyllis is a character in Greek mythology, daughter of a Thracian king, according to Samuel Sithon. Most other accounts do not give her father's name at all. One states he's named either Philander, Ceasus, or Thelos. She marries Demethon, king of Athens and son of Theseus, while he stops in Thrace on his journey home from the Trojan War. Is this the one that was turned into an almond tree? Yes. Demethon, duty-bound to Greece, returns home to help his father, leaving Phyllis behind. She sends him away with a casket, telling him that it contains a sacrament of Rhea, asking him to open it only if he has given up hope of returning to her. From here, the story diverges. In one version, Phyllis realises that he will not return and commits suicide by hanging herself from a tree. Where she is buried, an almond tree grows, which blossoms when Demethon returns to her. In another version, Demethon opens the casket and, horrified by what he sees inside, rides off in such great haste that his horse stumbles and he accidentally falls on his own sword. Oh dear, you don't want to do that. There is also some confusion regarding which nut tree she becomes, as hazelnuts were long called Nux Philidos, and are still sometimes called filbert today. In English, this version goes back at least to Gower, who wrote in Confessio Amantis, circa... Sorry, is that... What's CA? Is that circa? Yes. At circa 1390, the Phyllis in the same throw was shaped into a non-tetrae, that all men it might see, and after Phyllis Philibird, the tree was clept in the yerd, and yet for Demethon to shame, into this day it birthed the name. The story most notably appears in the second poem of Ovid's Heroides, a book of epistolary poems from mythical women to their respective men, and it also appears in the Aetia of Callimachus. The 9 ways is derived from the story of Phyllis, who is said to return 9 times to the shore to wait for Demethon's return. Phyllis, or Phyllis, is commonly used as a female given name. Variants are Phillida and Phillida. She is also mentioned in the song I Love, Alas, I Love... Well, anyway. We get the idea. So, again... it's possible that this poem was written with a general sort of allusion to that Phyllis. Again, I'm not suggesting they meant it as the same character, but certainly when poets do name characters, especially in older poetry, it's usually not accidental. Very often they're trying to communicate something. I suppose her suicide could be thought of as showing her great devotion towards her lover, in so much as she couldn't bear the thought of life without them, and in that way using Phyllis as the name of the object of this poem, the speaker to an extent legitimizes the relationship. Because one problem with this poem, as I was reading it, well, I say problem, I suppose I mean notable feature, is that there is nothing here that tells us that the love that is expressed is reciprocated. We have the speaker telling the animals to do all these things on behalf of their lover, but aside from the speaker's assurance that they're lovers, there is nothing here to tell us that they are. The only thing that Phyllis appears to do is walk around a bit and then have a nap. It's interesting that there is also an allusion to their relationship being hidden from the world. I wonder if there's something something more to be read into that. Not sure. I noticed here that stare is starling. Starling being a type of bird. I'm just checking. Oh, stare, linnet and cock sparrow. So it was from the previous poem. What else can we say about this poem? Valleys, alleys. Bower, lower are I rhymes. Frown doesn't seem to rhyme with anything. Warble doesn't either. Nor does sing or walks. So valleys, alleys. Bower, lower. That's surprise. I'm slightly surprised that the last line doesn't end on a rhyme. If any of them do, you kind of expect the last one to. Bidden, hidden. Am I missing some rhymes here? Bidden, hidden. So low. And then frown, warble. Oh, frown and warble is repeated. Ahaha. Okay, so the final line. Methinks I see her frown. You pretty wantons warble. Because it's being repeated, it doesn't need to rhyme with the verses that come before it, because it's going to sound consonant anyway, because it's something that you've just recently heard in full. That is to say, it's a full sentence that you've heard very recently, as opposed to just the sound of the end of a word. So that makes sense. Okay, so it's a sort of A, B, C, B, D, D, and then we have the two verses that are repeated, save for in the final stanza in which they're modified. I've got to admit, it is a reasonably well written poem, or at least seems to be. I'll tell you what about the meter? Ye little birds that sit and sing, that's iambic tetrameter amidst the shady valleys. I think that's, as before, an iambic trimeter, but with an extra syllable added. Amidst the shady valleys, yes. And see how Phyllis sweetly walks within her garden alleys. Yes, so this is all ballady. Go pretty birds about her bower. Hold on. Go pretty birds about her bower. Yep, that's iambic tetrameter. Sing pretty birds. Sing pretty birds. She may not lower. That's okay, so that's breaking from the balladiness, because that's also tetrameter. Methinks I see her frown. Iambic tetrameter. Ye pretty wantons warble. Ye pretty wantons warble. So that's a trimeter. So we've got 4 3 4 3 4 4 4 3 in terms of the number of feet in each verse, and I assume that repeats. Like I say, it is reasonably well put together. You can tell that the writer was skilled. The subject matter itself is fairly cliche, but there is some originality in how it's expressed, I would suggest. At least so far as I can tell. Right, next we move on to a poem by more than one poem Quite a few poems. Quite a few poems indeed. By a John Fletcher. Right, so let's find out who John Fletcher was. Must be this one. John Fletcher was a Jacobean playwright, following William Shakespeare as house playwright for the King's Men. Was among the most prolific and influential dramatists of his day. During his lifetime and in the early Restoration, his fame rivaled Shakespeare's. He collaborated on writing plays with Francis Beaumont and also with Shakespeare on 3 plays. Though his reputation has declined since, Fletcher remains an important transitional figure between the Elizabethan popular traditions and the popular drama of the Restoration. The Restoration? That was much later, was it not? Yeah. Because apparently he died in 1625. But the Restoration wasn't going to be for another 40 years or so. Oh no, not quite that long. Another 35 years. So, let's read a little more. Fletcher was born in December 1579 in Rye, Sussex, and died of the plague in August 1625. His father, Richard Fletcher, was an ambitious and successful cleric who was in turn Dean of Peterborough, Bishop of Bristol, Bishop of Worcester, and Bishop of London. Do note that it wasn't until Henry VIII's time that the clergy could start marrying. In fact, I'm not even 100% sure if they could during Henry VIII's time, because although Henry VIII was responsible for the Reformation, he himself was Catholic, as crazy as it sounds. I mean, he was as Catholic as any of the Catholic monarchs were. Of course, they didn't exactly follow the faith in quite the same way that the common populace would have. So certainly when his son took over, who was Henry VIII's son? Was that Edward the Fourth? Or am I making that up? Yes. Edward the Fourth was a Protestant monarch, so it may not have even been till he took over that the clergy could start marrying. But certainly not before Henry VIII's time. They would have been able to marry and have legitimate children. Because up until then, of course, England was a entirely Catholic country, and Catholic priests do not get married. So what I'm driving at here is that for his father, that is for John Fletcher's father to be a clergyman, that, and his legitimate son, that would have still been a relatively new thing. That wouldn't have been legally possible for more than 50 years or so, 50, 60 years, depending upon exactly when the change took place. I'm sure he wasn't alone in this, but just thought I'd mention it. Anyway, where were we? His father, as well, was a chaplain to Queen Elizabeth. As Dean of Peterborough, Richard Fletcher, at the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, at Fotheringay Castle, knelt down on the scaffold steps and started to pray out loud and at length, in a prolonged and rhetorical style, as though determined to force his way into the pages of history. He cried out at her death, "So perish all the Queen's enemies." Richard Fletcher died shortly after falling out of favour with the Queen, over a marriage she had advised against. He appears to have been partly rehabilitated before his death in 1596, but he died substantially in debt. The upbringing of John Fletcher and his 7 siblings was entrusted to his paternal uncle, Giles Fletcher, a poet and minor official. Okay, so his uncle was a poet. His uncle's connection ceased to be a benefit and may even have become a liability after the rebellion of Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, who had been his patron. Fletcher appears to have entered Corpus Christi College, Cambridge, in 1591 at the age of 11. It is not certain that he took a degree, but evidence suggests that he was preparing for a career in the church. Little is known about his time at college, but he evidently followed the path previously trodden by the university wits before him, from Cambridge to the burgeoning commercial theatre of London. Collaborations with Beaumont. In 1606, he began to appear as a playwright for the Children of Queen's Revels, then performing at the Blackfriars Theatre. Commendatory verses by Richard Brome in the Beaumont and Fletcher 1647 folio placed Fletcher in the company of Ben Jonson, whose poetry we've also read not that long ago, if I recall correctly. A comment on Jonson's to Drummond corroborates his claim, although it is not known when this friendship began. At the beginning of his career, his most important association was with Francis Beaumont. The two wrote together for close on a decade, first for the Children and then for the King's Men. According to an anecdote transmitted or invented by John Aubrey, they also lived together in Bankside, sharing clothes and having one wench in the house between them. This domestic arrangement, if it existed, was ended by Beaumont's marriage in 1613, and their dramatic partnership ended after Beaumont fell ill, probably of a stroke, the same year. Successor to Shakespeare. By this time, Fletcher had moved into a closer association with the King's Men. He collaborated with Shakespeare with Shakespeare on Henry VIII, The Two Noble Kinsmen, and The Lost Cardenio, which is probably, according to some modern scholars, the basis for Lewis Theobald's play Double Falsehood, a play he wrote singly after this time. The Woman's Prize, or The Tamer Tamed, is a sequel to The Taming of the Shrew. In 1616, after Shakespeare's death, Fletcher appears to have entered into an exclusive arrangement with the King's Men similar to Shakespeare's. Fletcher wrote only for that company between the death of Shakespeare and his death 9 years later. He never lost his habit of collaboration, working with Nathan Field and later with Philip Massinger, who succeeded him as house playwright for the King's Men. His popularity continued throughout his life. During the winter of 1621, 3 of his plays were performed at court. He died in 1625, apparently of the plague. He seems to have been buried in what is now Southwark Cathedral, although the precise location is not known. There is a reference by Aston Cockayne to a common grave for Fletcher and Massinger, also buried in Southwark. What is more certain is that 2 simple adjacent stones in the floor of the choir of the Southwark Cathedral One marked Edmund Shakespeare, 1607, the other John Fletcher, 1625, refer to Shakespeare's younger brother and the playwright. His mastery is most notable in two dramatic types, tragicomedy and comedy of manners. Okay, I think we'll stop there since most of the rest of this article seems to be about his stage history and plays, whereas we're interested in his poetry. Having read through that, I'm not anticipating any of that coming up in the poetry, but you never know till you read it. So, the first poem by John Fletcher is entitled Sleep. Come sleep, and with thy sweet deceiving, lock me in delight a while, let some pleasing dreams beguile all my fancies, that from thence I may feel an influence, all my powers of care bereaving. Though but a shadow, but a sliding, let me know some little joy. We that suffer long annoy, are contented with a thought, through an idle fancy wrought. Oh, let my joys have some abiding. Oh dear. Sounds like the poetry of someone that's extremely stressed with work or other problems in life. Yeah, he died substantially in debt, as the article said. So I wonder to what degree financial difficulties may have played a role. So deceiving and bereaving rhyme, a while beguile, thence influence. So it's A, B, B, C, C, A, which is an interesting rhyming scheme. It certainly is surprising how many different simple rhyming schemes that there seem to be introduced in these poems. I suppose it's not that surprising. The number of combinations of rhymes, especially if you include, say, sets of 3 and upwards, is clearly going to be very large, even for a short poem. Off the top of my head, I don't remember coming across A, B, B, C, C, A before, but here we are. As for rhythm, come sleep, and with thy sweet deceiving, that's 4, wasn't it? Lock me in delight a while. That sounds wrong. Lock me in delight a while. No, that's not so bad. So that's 3. Let some pleasing dreams beguile. That's 3. All my fancies, that from thence. That's 3, isn't it? All my fancies, that from thence, I may feel an influence. I may feel an influence. That's 4. Is it? I may feel an influence. No, it's 3. Although an is a weird word for this stress to fall on. I think you're much more likely to use a Pyrrhic substitution there. All my powers of care bereaving. That's 4. Though but a shadow, but a sliding, let me know some little joy. We that suffer long annoy, are contented with a thought, though an idle fancy wrought. Oh, let my joys have some abiding. Yeah, so again, 4-3-3-3-3-4, which also is consistent with the rhyming structure as well. With the two A's rhyming at bookending the stanza and also being verses with more syllables and more feet, in fact. It's good. But does sound like he suffered from a bit of insomnia, doesn't it? I wonder if he wrote this while he was actually in bed trying to sleep. Right, let's move on to Bridal's song, Cynthia. That was a mythological figure, wasn't it? Cynthia is a feminine given name of Greek origin, from Mount Cynthus on Delos Island. The name has been in use in the Anglosphere since the 1600s. There are various spellings for this name, and it can be abbreviated to Cindy, 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 or occasionally Thea or Thea. You know, I reckon we looked this up only last week or the week before. This is ringing quite a loud bell. Cynthia was originally an epithet of the Greek goddess Artemis, who, according to legend, was born on Mount Cynthus. Selene, the Greek personification of the moon, and the Roman Diana were also sometimes called Cynthia. That was it, because there was a sort of confusion between Artemis and the moon. Right. Cynthia, to thy power and thee we obey. Joy to this great company, and no day. Come to steal this night away, till the rites of love are ended, and the lusty bridegroom say, welcome light of all befriended. Pace out, you watery powers below, let your feet, like the galleys when they row, even beat. Let your unknown measures set, to the still winds tell to all, that gods are come, immortal great, to honour this great nuptial. Why would you choose Artemis for that? Artemis was very famously a virgin goddess. Quite ardently so. So why would she be part of a bridal song? I mean, she is a goddess, but her domain had nothing to do with the home, so far as I'm aware, or married life. I've got a feeling when we looked at this last time, it might have been after trying to read one of the riddles. Well, I said trying to interpret. Could be wrong. Artemis. The goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, wild animals, nature, vegetation, childbirth. Ah! Care of children and chastity. Okay, yes. I did not know about childbirth or care of children. She was heavily identified with Selene, the personification of the moon, and Hecate, another lunar deity, and was thus regarded as one of the most prominent lunar deities in mythology, alongside the aforementioned two. Oh, so it isn't as ridiculous a mix-up as you might think. She was actually associated with the moon in ancient times. That makes some sense, because Apollo was a brother, wasn't he? And Apollo was associated with the sun, even though he wasn't the sun god. I think Helios was. Or Helios. She would often roam the forests of Greece, attended by her large entourage, mostly made up of nymphs, some mortals, and hunters. The goddess Diana is her Roman equivalent. Right, so how did she get associated with childbirth? Apollo was her brother. Oh, okay. So this paragraph does go on to explain that. In Greek tradition, Artemis is the daughter of Zeus and Leto, and the twin sister of Apollo. In most accounts, the twins are the products of an extramarital liaison. For this, Zeus's wife Hera forbade Leto from giving birth anywhere on land. Only the island of Delos gave refuge to Leto, allowing her to give birth to her children. Usually, Artemis is the twin to be born first, who then proceeds to assist Leto in the birth of the second child, Apollo. Like a brother, she was a chorotrophic, child-nurturing deity. That is the patron and protector of young children, especially young girls and women, and was believed to both bring disease upon women and children and relieve them of it. Artemis was worshipped as one of the primary goddesses of childbirth and midwifery along the Aletheia and Hera. Much like Athena and Hestia, Artemis preferred to remain a maiden goddess and was sworn never to marry, and was thus one of the three Greek virgin goddesses over whom the goddess of love and lust, Aphrodite, had no power whatsoever. So that's why, presumably, or at least that's consistent with why certain curses, particularly diseases, were associated with Apollo. I wonder if they formed a partnership there as well, whereby it was specifically Apollo cursing males and Artemis cursing females. There is, of course, quite a lot of guesswork on my part there, but it would make sense. Let's see if there's a reference to marriage. It doesn't look like it. Okay, so hold on, let's also look up bride, shall we? Okie doke. So now it's making more sense why Cynthia is being mentioned in this poem. It's presumably a direct reference to Artemis, who would have played a role in childbirth and child nurturing, which seems relevant to married life. So you can understand why a couple just marrying may wish to invoke a blessing from her. So let's read it again. Cynthia, to thy power and thee we obey. Joy to this great company, and no day come to steal this night away, till the rites of love are ended, and the lusty bridegrooms say, welcome, light of all befriended. Pace out, you watery powers below, let your feet, like the galleys when they row, even beat. Let your unknown measures set to the still winds, tell to all the God to come, immortal, great, to honour this great nuptial. I'm wondering who's being addressed here. I mean, it says Cynthia, but you wouldn't... At the very beginning it says Cynthia, but in the second stanza... in the second stanza, it seems to me that what are quite clearly commands are being given, which you wouldn't usually do to a god or a goddess. That tends not to end well, unless you are yourself a greater god or goddess. Oh, maybe it's a continuation of the very last verses, where it says, "And the lusty bridegrooms say, welcome light of all befriended." Maybe the bridegroom is still giving a command to other people that are apparently gathered. Pace out, you watery powers below. Oh, you watery powers below. That's who's being addressed. I don't follow that. Let your feet, like galleys when they row, even beat. Let your unknown measures set to the still winds. Tell to all that gods are come, immortal, great, to honour this great nuptial. So I don't know what the watery powers is a reference to, but the rest of it makes sense. What have we got in terms of rhyme and rhythm? Obey day, the company, away say, ended befriended, so it's ABAB rhyming. The rhythm's much more interesting. Cynthia to thy... Cynthia to thy power and thee... Wait. Power and thee. It seems very odd to stress "and", but that is where the beat falls. How many was that? Cynthia, to thy power and thee. That's 4, isn't it? We obey. Wait, obey. We obey. So that's trochaic then. And there's 2 feet there. So 4 feet, 2 feet. Joy to this great company. That's trochaic. Is this supposed to be trochaic? Cynthia. Cynthia. Oh, that's right. It wouldn't be Cynthia. It would be Cynthia. To thy power. 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 That feels wrong. I suppose it could be a trochaic substitution though. But don't you usually do that after a caesura? It's a bit of an odd place for it. Okay, let's try again. Cynthia, to thy power and thee. That's 5, so 5 and 2. Joy to this great company. That's 4, isn't it? Hold on, let me make sure I'm not going absolutely mad. Thea, 2, to thy, 3, power, 4, and thee, 5. We obey, 2, joy to this great company, 4. Yeah, so it's 5, 2, 4, 2, and no day. Come to steal this night away. That's 4. Till the rights of love are ended. 4. And the lusty bridegroom say, 4. welcome, light of all befriended. 4. So it's 52424444. Now does that continue? Pace out, you watery powers below. Pace out, you watery powers below. That's 4. Let your feet do like the galleys when they row. 4. Even beat. 2. Let your unknown measures set. 4. To the still winds tell to all that gods are come. That gods are come. Immortal. Great. That's switched to I ams, but it's 4. To honour this great nuptial. Nuptial. Yeah, that should be 2, shouldn't it? Nuptial. To honour this great nuptial. Yeah, because it's not going to be to honour, is it? It's going to be to honour. So that's gone to I ams for some reason. Curious. So a bit irregular. It does have a nice sound to it, though, I have to admit. Perhaps I'll give it one more reading. Cynthia, to thy power and thee we obey. Joy to this great company, and no day come to steal this night away, till the rites of love are ended, and the lusty bridegroom say, welcome, light of all befriended. Pace out, you watery powers below. Let your feet, like the galleys when they row, even beat. Let your unknown measures set. To the still winds tell to all that gods are come, immortal, great, to honour this great nuptial. Now I think about it, I don't think we've read that many poems that have a marriage theme, have we? I can't remember. I think we have read some, although I admit off the top of my head I can't remember which ones, but nowhere near as many as, say, poems we've read about love in general, or death of a loved one. No, it's surprising in a way. You'd have thought it would be a much more common theme. It's funny. Even though the structure of the poem seems a bit irregular, I do quite like it for what it is. I haven't discussed the meaning that much because I at least felt that it was fairly straightforward. Unless, of course, there's something going on that's completely going over my head. Anyway, if you have any comments, please leave them in chat. Otherwise, we'll move on to Aspasia's song. So, who was Aspasia? Aspasia was a Metic woman in classical Athens. Born in Miletus, she moved to Athens and began a relationship with the statesman Pericles, with whom she had a son, Pericles the Younger. According to the traditional historical narrative, she worked as a courtesan and was tried for asabeia, impiety, though modern scholars have questioned the factual basis for either of these claims, which both derive from ancient comedy. Though Aspasia is one of the best attested women from the Greco-Roman world, and the most important woman in the history of 5th century Athens, almost nothing is certain about her life. Aspasia was portrayed in old comedy as a prostitute and a madam, and in ancient philosophy as a teacher and a rhetorician. She has continued to be a subject of both visual and literary artists until the present. From the 20th century, she has been portrayed both as a sexualized and sexually liberated woman and as a feminist role model fighting for women's rights in ancient Athens. Oh, it's tempting to read all this, isn't it? But there is indeed quite a lot of it. Legacy, ancient reception. In the classical period, two schools of thought developed around Aspasia. One tradition, deriving from old comedy, emphasises her influence over Pericles and her involvement in the sex trade. The other, which can be traced back to the 4th century philosophy, concentrates on her intellect and rhetorical skill. Okay, so that just reaffirms what we read up the top. Okie doke. So this is Aspasia's song. Lay a garland on my hearse of the dismal yew. Maidens, willow branches bare, say I died true. My love was false, but I was firm. From my hour of birth, upon my buried body lie, lightly, gentle earth. Goodness. I wasn't expecting that. Did she have a particularly famous death? In 429 BC, Pericles died, according to ancient sources. Aspasia then married another politician, Lysicles, and gave birth to another son, Peristus. As Peristus is not otherwise known as a name, it means supplier or provider, and was a euphemism for thief. Some scholars have argued that the name comes from a misunderstanding of a joke in comedy. Pomeroy, however, suggests that Peristus' unusual name may have been chosen by Lysicles for political reasons, to draw attention to his providing for the people of Athens. Lysicles died a year after Pericles, in 428, and nothing is recorded of Aspia's life after this point. It's unknown where or when she died. So that doesn't figure. Did Pericles die in a particularly notable fashion? He, along with several members of his family, succumbed to the plague of Athens in 429 BC, which weakened the city-state during a protracted conflict with Sparta. So no, that doesn't figure either. I don't know why Aspasia is being used as an example of death in romance. Let's look up you and let's look up Willow, shall we? See what they correlate to. Willow, mourning. You, sorrow. That makes perfect sense. So let's read it again. Lay a garland on my hearse of the dismal yew. Maidens, willow branches bare, say I died true. My love was false, but I was firm. From my hour of birth, upon my buried body lie. Lightly, gentle earth. I think this is actually a ballad. I think it's alternating 4 feet, 3 feet. And I think the rhyming structure, which is A, B, C, B, is also consistent with a ballad, if I recall correctly. Which, given that that was the form of popular song, it's interesting that that's the form that was chosen for this poem, given its subject matter. I'm not saying it's wrong, I don't have enough experience to make that judgment. It just strikes me as notable. The only way I can figure this making sense is if Aspasia was, because of her reputation as a prostitute, again, it's not clear whether she was or not in reality, but because of her reputation as such, possibly that's what this could be getting at? The dangers of falling in love with a prostitute as they understood it at the time this poem was written? I don't know otherwise. Well, let's keep going. So the next one is Hymn to Pan. Now, Pan was also a figure in Greek mythology, weren't they? Greek god of wild shepherds and flocks. They had a pan flute, didn't they? Which must be named after them. In ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pan is the god of the wild, shepherds and flocks, rustic music, and impromptus. Impromptus is a free-form musical composition with the character of an extempore improvisation as if prompted by the spirit of the moment, usually for a solo instrument such as piano. And companion of the nymphs. His hindquarters, legs, and horns of a goat. In the same manner as a faun or satyr, with his homeland in rustic Arcadia, he is also recognised as the god of fields, groves, wooded glens, and often affiliated with sex. Because of this, Pan is connected to fertility and the season of spring. In Roman religion and myth, Pan's counterpart was Faunus, a nature god who was the father of Bonadea, sometimes identified as Fauna. He was also closely associated with Silvanus, due to their similar relationships with woodlands. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Pan became a significant figure in the Romantic movement of Western Europe and also in the 20th century neo-pagan movement. Right. Obviously this massively predates that then, because this is Elizabethan. Or possibly just barely Jacobean. Actually no, not just barely. I keep forgetting the dates. But Elizabeth I didn't live long into the 17th century, did she? No, inherited the crown of England in 1603 as James I. So yeah, this might be early Jacobean then. Sing his praises that doth keep our flocks from harm. Pan, the father of our sheep, and arm in arm, tread we softly in a round, whilst the hollow neighbouring ground fills the music with her sound. Pan, O great god Pan, to thee thus do we sing, thou who keepest us chaste and free as the young spring. Ever be thy honour spoke, from that place the morn is broke, to that place day doth unyoke. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, there is definitely a very strong pastoral theme to this, which is quite common in poetry. It's notable the degree to which it seems to be romanticising the pastoral life, given that this is pre-Romantic era. But then again, that wouldn't be the first poem we've read that has done so either. So clearly this romanticisation of the pastoral lifestyle goes back a long way. I expect probably a very, very long way actually. But I'm speculating. Thou who keepest us chaste and free as a young spring. Why would Pan be associated with chastity? Surely that is the exact opposite of his associations. How peculiar. Ever be thy honour spoke, from that place the morn is broke, to that place day doth unyoke. See, from that place the morn is broke would seem to be the east, to that place day doth unyoke. To yoke something is to put a yoke over it, isn't it? And metaphorically to constrain something. So unyoke would be to unrestrain something. But what would the day be unyoking? A yoke. I mean, I can only assume that it's saying from the east to the west. I just don't understand the metaphor. Perhaps it's trying to imply that the night is a yoke that restrains an area, and the day comes and sets it free. Seems like a bit of a stretch without some pre-existing cultural allusions to that effect, though. Then again, perhaps such cultural allusions already did exist and I just don't know about them. Okay, I don't think there's much to be said about the meaning of it. It seems fairly straightforward. Generally speaking, at face value, it is a poem that exists to honour and compliment the Greek god Pan. But at a deeper level, it seems to be there to romanticise the pastoral lifestyle, as well as to I suppose this is more incidental rather than the purpose of the poem, but with a verse like "Thou who keepest us chaste and free," it does seem to extol the virtues of chastity, which of course was kind of considered a good thing at the time, sort of. I mean, I think in medieval times and Renaissance times, well, the medieval period through to the Renaissance, well, I suppose really, from the introduction of Christianity in Britain all the way through to about Edwardian times to varying degrees, chastity would have been seen as a good thing outside of marriage. But that was more about making sure people aren't promiscuous, because promiscuity caused problems, especially in an age before it was possible to effectively control pregnancy and the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. I don't think chastity in general was seen as just such a great thing. Well, I suppose it was by certain religious groups, but not in the mainstream. You've got the whole thing about the Virgin Mary, though. But again, I feel like the whole point there is that well, she was married, wasn't she? She was married to Joseph. At least I assume they were married. They were certainly a couple. I mean, chastity's associated with purity, isn't it? And goodness. So yeah, I suppose in conclusion, it's not that surprising that it's extolling the virtues of chastity. I still think it seems a bit strange, especially in connection with Pan. It just strikes me as, I mean, he's the antithesis of chastity, is he not? I find that particular part of this poem strange. Perhaps I'm missing something. Anywho, let's keep going. So the next poem's entitled Away Delights. Away, delights, go seek some other dwelling, for I must die. Farewell, false love, thy tongue is ever telling lie after lie. Forever let me rest now from thy smarts. Alas, for pity go, and fire their hearts that have been hard to thee. Mine was not so. Never again deluding love shall know me, for I will die, and all those griefs that think to overgrow me shall be as I. For ever will I sleep, while poor maids cry, alas, for pity stay, and let us die. With thee, man cannot mock us in the clay. Huh. What a very suicidal poem. Again, love is a very prevalent theme. We appear to have an AB rhyming scheme, don't we? Dwelling, telling, die, lie, smart's heart goes so, and so on. Looks like it's iambic. Wait, is that iambic? Away, delights, go seek some other dwelling. Yes. Alternating iambic pentameter with iambic bimeter? Is it called bimeter? I've forgotten. When we only have two. It's dimeter, isn't it? Yes. Dimeter. Ah, but then we move away from that here. Forever let me rest now from thy smarts. That's 5. Alas, for pity go. That's 3, isn't it? And fire their hearts. That's 2. Which I assume is repeated again. Oh, I wonder if this is going to be 6, making it an Alexandrine, if I recall correctly. Yes, I was thinking of an Alexandrian. With thee, men cannot mock us in... Hold on. With thee, men cannot mock us in the clay. No, it's only 5. Why at the end is the speaker apparently urging their love to die with them? I am missing something significant here. I follow it most of the way. Away delight, go seek other dwelling, for I must die. I mean, essentially this is a melodramatic command for the niceties in life, the nice things in life to leave. Farewell, false love, thy tongue is ever telling lie after lie. Okay, so he doesn't think his lover loves them, and he thinks they lie. Plausible. Forever let me rest now from thy smarts. Alas, for pity go, and fire their hearts that have been hard to thee. Mine was not so. So what we have here is an explanation that they want to die because of all the things you've done that have hurt me. Then we have what I believe is a command to go and be nasty to the people that are nasty to you, and then emphasizing that they had not been nasty. That is the speaker. Then we have never again deluding love shall know me, for I will die. So I won't make a mistake in love again, because I'll be dead. And all those griefs that think to overgrow me shall be as I. So griefs can't get you if you're dead. Forever will I sleep while poor maidens cry. Sorry, where poor maids cry. It's not clear why the poor maids are crying. I mean, you'd assume it's because the speaker is dead, but it's not clear to me whether the intended meaning is just that they're sad to see women that knew the speaker personally would be sad to see them go, or it could be a more general suggestion that no maid, that is young, marriageable woman, would want to see a good man die in general. Perhaps there is some suggestion here that he's almost becoming a martyr of love, and that maids in the future will cry thinking of this poor man who died because his lover was nasty to him. Bit of supposition on my part there, or perhaps something else entirely. It's not clear. Then we have alas for pity stay, notice a quotation mark, and let us die with thee. Oh, while poor maids cry, not cry as in a tearful display of sorrow, but cry as in exclaim. Alas for pity stay, and let us die with thee. Men cannot mock us in the clay. So men cannot mock us in the clay is presumably meaning underground, as in when you're dead. That much seems clear. This must be the maids that are speaking, So the maids are begging the speaker to stay for a while so that they can die with him. And then it says men cannot mock us in the clay. So it's becoming... So a suicide is becoming a suicide pact. It does seem very self-pitying, doesn't it? And it's almost legitimising the feelings by suggesting that I as a man may be going through these terrible emotions, but young women would feel exactly the same and in fact would want to band together with me. Bit of an odd one, that poem. Bit of an odd one. Let's keep going. So the next poem is entitled Love's Emblems. Now the lusty spring is seen, golden yellow, gaudy blue, daintily invite the view. Everywhere, on every green, roses blushing as they blow, and enticing men to pull, lilies whiter than the snow, woodbines of sweet honey full, all love's emblems, and all cry, ladies, if not plucked, we die. Yet the lusty spring have stayed, blushing red and purest white, daintily to love invite, every woman, every maid, cherries kissing as they grow, and inviting men to taste, apples even ripe below, wind gently to the waist, all love's emblems, and all cry, ladies, if not plucked, we die. So I think this poem is essentially just... Oh, Jenny says, depends on the social classes, which periods, places those young women were from. Well, this was written in... I assume you're referring to the previous poem. This would have been written either in... on page 212... that isn't. I assume you're referring to the number of the poem, not the page number. We're on page, or now we're on page 238. Anyway, yes. This would have been written in either late Elizabethan or early Jacobean times. Somewhere between 1600 and 1625, most probably. And this would have been in England. So you would have had all the romantic cliches of chivalry already very well established. Because that stuff started, what, around the 1200s, I want to say? And it was quite clear, even when we began reading poetry from this anthology, back when we were reading the stuff pre-even Henry VII, pre-Tudor times, that a lot of the romantic cliches attached to chivalry had already been established. I find the suggestion that these people would, particularly this man and these young ladies, would band together and commit suicide together to clearly be implausible, but I'm not sure it's supposed to be plausible so much as it's supposed to be metaphorical. I suppose what it's trying to do is to legitimise feelings of self-pity by saying that what you're going through in terms of these feelings of rejection are nothing new. It happens to everybody, even the young, desirable women that you yourself seek and wish that your lover were. That's probably what it's about, I would suggest, although I'm open to other theories, of course. As for this poem, Love's Emblems, 212, it seems to me that it's probably just a declaration that life is short, and you should find love while you can. But also exposing us to a great deal of imagery, of beautiful imagery, of spring and flowers and so on, which all act as what's the word? All act as, in one way or another, metaphors for what's the expression? Can't think of the term. The act of pursuing somebody in a romantic capacity. The chase, if you will, but there's a much better term for it. If you're attempting to woo somebody. Can't think of the term right now, not sure why. Anywho, yeah, let's read this again quickly, to remind me. Now the lusty spring is seen, golden yellow, gaudy blue, daintily invite the view. Everywhere on every green, roses blushing as they blow, and enticing men to pull, lilies whiter than the snow, woodbines of sweet honey full, all love's emblems, and all cry, ladies, if not plucked, we die. Yet the lusty spring have stayed, blushing red and purest white, daintily to love invite, every woman, every maid, cherries kissing as they grow, and inviting men to taste, apples even ripe below, winding gently to the waist, all love's emblems, and all cry, ladies, if not plucked, we die. So yeah, on the face of it, it's a poem about how all these various bounties of spring, all these beautiful, fragrant and tasty things, don't last forever, and if you don't take the chance to pluck them while you can, they'll be gone. Well, all of this is acting as one big metaphor for love, I would suggest. What do we have in terms of rhyme and rhythm? Scene green, blue view, so that's A, B, B, A. Blow snow, pool full, so A, B, A, B. Cry, die, A, A. So that's A, B, B, A, C, D, C. A, B, B, A, C, D, C, D, E, E. Which actually rings a bell? Have we read a poem with that scheme before? I think we have. I don't remember where, though. As for rhythm, now the lusty spring is seen. Golden yellow, gaudy blue, They're both 7 syllables, aren't they? Trochaic, even. Trochaic tetrameter with the final syllable docked. Daintily. Invite the view. Everywhere, on every green. Still seems to be the same meter. Roses blushing as they blow. Aside from a Pyrrhic substitution there, that also fits. And enticing men to pull. Lilies whiter than the snow. Ooh, I just had a thought. I wonder if that's where the expression of on the pool comes from. You could almost imagine that becoming Victorian slang, couldn't you? And then later the cultured etymology of the term being forgotten. Woodbines of sweet honey full, all love's emblems, and all cry, ladies, if not plucked we die. Yep, so I'd suggest it's trochaic, tetrameter with the final syllable docked, and a rhyming scheme as I'd previously indicated. It's actually quite a simple, regular system. Surprisingly so. And it certainly has a pleasant sound to it, I think. Anyway, we'd best head on to the riddles, hadn't we? So I assume we finished on 152. So, that was: one day to Parnassus incognito straying. Parnassus, I believe, was the mountain on which the Muses lived. As the Muses and I at Crambo were playing. What was Crambo? That was some sort of guessing game, wasn't it? Apollo and Frolic, a word would propound, to which all the 9 in their places chimed round, but not one the mysterious couplet found. He smiled and said, girls, since the females of Britain enigmas delight in, and none this have hit on, here take it and disguise it as children do babies, and send it next year to your rivals, those ladies. Thalia, o'er poetry comic presiding, the masquerade dress had the charge of providing. 2 horns on its head she agreeably placed, and a neat buckle girdle affixed to its waist. A large hump on its back was like porter's pad laid, in which there no beauty, yet use was displayed. On one side a whimsical locket was hung, which they sometimes would kick, but oft trample upon. Next its linen she put a double of leather, like postilion in winter, to guard against bad weather. But when the seasons were good, or in holiday time, twound in velvet, brocade, or embroidery shine, as gay as the best and as splendidly fine, she gave it no wings, but without them 'tis found to move through the air, and yet not touch the ground. To Britain's fair females devoted, they'll own its worth, and the name of their servant make known. And the answer to that was a side saddle. I didn't know this until I encountered this riddle last week. Turns out that side saddle isn't just a method of riding a horse. It actually requires a specifically built saddle, and there are some significant clues to it being a side saddle. In this riddle, such as the 2 horns on its head, which would, I believe, one leg would sit between. I think the 2 horns are there for the leg to rest on it and be fixed in place. The rider's leg, that is. So, yep, that was the riddle and that was the solution. It was a side saddle. A saddle built for being ridden, for riding a horse by the side saddle method. So, next we move on to 153. I've heard of one of humankind, but yet without a human mind, whose oft is seen from many a plain, here and there and here again, but chiefly when the sun from high descends and views the nether sky, he with great swiftness daily moves o'er hills and dales and shady groves, and yet this mighty man of fame is but a creature of the brain. Then tell me, ladies, if you can, who is this fancied wondrous man? Oh, goodness. Courting. I think courting was the word I was trying to think of before when we were reading the poetry. That is to pursue someone in a romantic capacity. Anyway, the riddle. See, my first thought is that it's probably a metaphorical person, or possibly even a mythological person, like, say, Father Time. Although I don't think it is Father Time. I feel like the allusion is probably more specific than that. Jenny says, I've heard a kind of sound, such music. I've heard of one of humankind. I think that just means that they've been told about them. I've heard is a what would you call it? It's not even quite an idiom. It's an expression strategy in English which tells the listener that you have been told something by one or more people without revealing who that one or more people are. So, for example, if you had heard a rumour, you might say, I've heard that so-and-so is doing such and such. He with great swiftness daily moves o'er hills and dales and shady groves. So daily moves. So it's not, say, good old Saint Nick, because this happens every day. And yet this mighty man of fame is but a creature of the brain. It's very notable that where it says who oft is seen from many a plain, it goes on to say, chiefly when the sun from high descends and views the nether sky. I'm fairly certain that descends and views the nether sky means that it's night time. Or at the very least, coming towards the end of day. Perhaps sunset. It says chiefly, though. So it's not the only instance of this. See, if it had said that this person only comes out of night, that would tell us something useful. But to say chiefly, well, I'm not saying it's not useful, but it does make it harder, doesn't it? See, the one thing I'm thinking, or the one thing that keeps I keep going back to in my head, is that as the sun's setting, the shadows get longer and longer, and if you were looking from a distance, watching the shadows, they would appear to be speeding up and racing towards the opposite horizon at an alarming speed. But I don't know of any personification of that effect. I can't think of a man or creature that's said to appear in the shadows as they get long or anything like that. Jenny says, he with great swiftness daily moves. Something like a history book or something recording a period of events, something ongoing. I'd be surprised. It sounds like this is something that happens every day. And I suspect we're probably looking for some sort of personification of a natural effect. Jenny says every day a calendar. Well, a calendar isn't a personification of anything. I've heard of one of humankind, but yet without a human mind. And later on it says, is but a creature of the brain. So I'm expecting this to be something that is referred to as though it's a person, even though it isn't a person. So the example I gave earlier was Father Time. Father Time is a mythological figure who... That is even mythological. I know his Father Time comes from mythology. He comes from Saturn, doesn't he? The god. But the Roman god. But he's almost like a literary device. But you would talk about Father Time as if they were actually a person, but of course they're not. They're not real. Would you call them an allegorical figure? Is that the right term? Jenny says an almanac. Well, again, the problem with that, Jenny, is an almanac is not a person. Yeah, so to use my analogy, Father Time is a personification of time. In recent centuries, he is usually depicted as an elderly bearded man, sometimes with wings, dressed in a robe and carrying a scythe and an hourglass, and an hourglass or other timekeeping device. Around New Year's Eve, the media use the convenient trope of Father Time as the personification of the previous year, or the old year, who typically hand over the duties of time to the equally allegorical baby New Year, or the New Year, who otherwise characterises the preceding year. In these depictions, Father Time is usually depicted wearing a sash with the old year's date on it. Time in his allegorical form, so yeah, an allegorical figure I think would be the correct term, is often depicted revealing or unveiling the allegorical truth, sometimes at the expense of a personification of falsehood, fraud or envy. This theme is related to the idea of veritas filia temporis, time is the father of truth. So yeah, you have all these personifications within personifications of various abstract concepts like falsehood and time and the new year, and I suspect it's one of them we're looking for. I can't think what it would be though. I've heard of one of humankind, but yet without a human mind, but oft is seen from many a plane. So a plane, again, this is also makes me think it's probably a shadow, because the thing that is so, or related to shadows, because the thing that is significant about a plane, specifically, is that there is not much on them. Like, if it was a woods, you'd struggle to see the shadows getting much longer, because they, as the sun sets, because there would be so many of them. They'd be everywhere. But on a plane, if you had something fairly tall on one side, its shadow would be visible over a very long distance. Here and there and here again, but chiefly when the sun from high descends and views the nether sky, he with great swiftness daily moves o'er hills and dales and shady groves. And yet this mighty man of fame is but a creature of the brain. And tell me, ladies, if you can, who is this fancy wondrous man? Oh, wasn't there an allegorical figure that notionally puts a blanket over the earth at sunset? I feel like there was, but I can't think what they're called for the life of me. I think I'm gonna have to look it up. I think I've developed these ideas as far as I can take them. We'll have to see if I was on the right lines or not. So what are we on? 153? I'll go slowly through them so we don't go too far. So the one that we already knew the solution to, the solution was the side saddle, and I think that's 152. Yes. Jack-o'-lantern. Who in the wild green yonder is Jack-o'-lantern? Sorry, lantern. There is no reference to a jack-o'-lantern on Wikipedia, it would seem. Let me do a wider search quickly. Oh. Wikipedia does have it, but it's under... Oh no, that's jack-o'-lantern. That's very different. I do wonder if it could be related to jack-o'-lanterns because it is so similar. But even if that were the case, there would still be some missing context there. Oh, hold on. The term jack-o'-lantern was originally used to describe the visual phenomena ignis fatuus, fallish fire, known as will-o'-the-wisps in English folklore, used especially in East England. Its earliest known use dates to the 1660s. Okay. So, is lanthorn an archaic form of lantern? It's the only thing that turns up. It could even be a misprint in the original copy of the book. Hold on. Archaic lanthorn. And clearly lanthorn is an intermediate. Okay. Spelling lanthorn was current during the 16th to 19th centuries and originates with a folk etymology associating the word with the use of horn as a translucent cover. Still no reference to lanthorn though, but I think it's I don't think I'm being overly what's the word? I don't think I'm being overly rash to suggest that lanthorn is probably an intermediate between lantern and lanthorn. Especially given that I assume even if it was spelt lanthorn, they were probably still pronouncing it lantern. So I could sort of see how an LANTHERN spelling could come about as an intermediate. Right. We were going to look up the folklore, weren't we? The story of the jack-o'-lantern comes in many forms and is similar to the story of will-o'-the-wisps, retold in different forms across Western Europe, including Italy, Norway, Spain, and Sweden. In Switzerland, children will leave bottles of milk or cream out for... Oh, I do apologise. In Switzerland, children will leave bowls of milk or cream out for mythical house spirits called Jacko the Bowl. An old Irish folktale from the mid-18th century tells of Stingy Jack, a lazy yet shrewd blacksmith who uses a cross to trap Satan. One story says that Jack tricked Satan into climbing an apple tree. Once he was up there, Jack quickly placed crosses around the trunk or carved a cross into the bark so that Satan couldn't get down. Another version, citation needed, of the story says that Jack was getting chased by some villagers from whom he had stolen. He then met Satan, who claimed it was time for him to die. However, the thief stalled his death by tempting Satan with a chance to bedevil the church-going villagers chasing him. Jack told Satan to turn into a coin with which he would pay for the stolen goods. Satan could take on any shape he wanted. Later, when the coin Satan disappeared, the Christian villagers would fight over who had stolen it. The devil agreed to this plan. He turned himself into a silver coin and jumped into Jack's wallet, only to find himself next to a cross Jack had also picked up in the village. Jack closed the wallet tight, and the cross stripped the devil of his powers, and so he was trapped. In both folktales, Jack lets Satan go after him after he agrees to never take his soul. Many years later, the thief died, as all living things do. Of course, Jack's life had been too sinful for him to go to heaven. However, Satan had promised not to take his soul, so he was barred from hell as well. Jack now had nowhere to go. He asks how he would see where to go, as he had no light, and Satan mockingly tossed him a burning coal to light his way. Jack carved out one of his turnips, which were his favourite food, put the coal inside it, and began endlessly wandering the earth for a resting place. He became known as Jack of the Lantern or Jack-o'-lantern. Cornish folklorist Dr. Thomas Quiller Couch that sounds very familiar. That doesn't happen to be the... No. Okay. The individual who put together the poetry anthology we're reading is Arthur Quiller Couch. So possibly related, possibly not, I don't know. Died 1884, recorded the use of the term in a rhyme used in Popero, Cornwall, in conjunction with Joan the Wad, the Cornish version of Will-o'-the-Wisps. The people of Popero regarded them both as pixies. The rhyme goes, Jack-o'-the-lantern, Joan the Wad, who tickled the maid and made her mad. Like me home, the weather's bad. Jack-o'-lanterns were also a way of protecting one's home against the undead. Superstitious people used them specifically to ward off vampires. They thought this because it was said that jack-o'-lantern's light was a way of identifying vampires who, once their identity was known, would give up their hunt for you. Right, let's go back to the original riddle and read it again. I've heard of one of humankind, but yet without a human mind, who oft is seen from many a plain, here and there and here again, but chiefly when the sun from high descends and views the nether sky. He with great swiftness daily moves over hills and dales and shady groves, and yet this mighty man of fame is but a creature of the brain. And tell me, ladies, if you can, who is this fancied wondrous man? Yep, that still doesn't figure. I don't follow. I mean, I know will-o'-the-wisps are notionally caused by, well, allegedly caused by gas escaping the earth and catching light, much like, or especially in graveyards. Although I've never found that explanation entirely convincing. In so much as you'd have thought you would just see a fire that's coming out of the ground, which you wouldn't confuse with some sort of supernatural being. And so I could understand something like that occurring over a plane. But that's not even what's being described here. Or at least it doesn't seem to be. At least it's not consistent with what we read on Wikipedia. I don't get it. I'm sorry to say. Anywho, we'd probably better stop there for this week. So, thank you for coming, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be streaming again on Friday and Saturday and Monday, and they'll all be video game streams. I haven't yet decided what I'll be playing. And then next Wednesday we'll be back around to more poetry and riddles. So once again, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. Good night.